I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Michael Parenti. He's one of our country's most prolific radical thinkers, has authored 15 books, and they are on such topics as history, democracy, fascism, U.S. imperialism, communism, terrorism, globalism, racism, gender, and class politics. And I would just like to mention also that having read Inventing Reality in 1987 when it first came out, I think, was it 88, that it made me the media activist that I am today. So I have taken what he talked about with the media and I have turned it into my life work, much thanks to Dr. Parenti for this eye-opening piece of work. And it's still in print. It was republished in 1993. And he did Inventing Reality, The Politics of News Media. He's written Against Empire, and his most recent book is The Terrorism Trap, September 11th and Beyond. Dr. Parenti has also written hundreds of articles that have been published in a wide array of newspapers, and his writings have been translated into over 12 languages and to be enjoyed by readers, academics, social activists alike. Michael Parenti appears on radio, television, talk shows to discuss current issues and ideas from his published works. Dr. Parenti's talks and commentaries are played on radio stations to audiences in the United States, Canada, and abroad. In recent years, he's devoted himself full-time to writing and lecturing. Dr. Michael Parenti received his PhD in political science from Yale University in 1962 and has also taught at a number of colleges and universities. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Parenti.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I think I want to start by talking about something that we never learn in school, and that's imperialism. I got as Ann said, I have a PhD in political science, and it occurred to me that I never studied imperialism in all those years from grade school on. Oh, I heard about British imperialism and the Roman Empire and Soviet imperialism, which was going to take over the world. But U.S. imperialism, the term would horrify some of our fellow citizens who apparently trust everything their leaders say. I'm not one of those people who thinks that U.S. foreign policy is all mixed up, that it's all confused, that these guys just don't know what they're doing, and they're so stupid. They're so stupid. There's so many liberal intellectuals who are never happier with them when they're saying that their leaders are so stupid, they're so stupid. Or people are hysterical, people this and that. They feel so good, here are these guys who are sticking it to us one way and up one side, down the other, both ends, and you've got our friends talking about how stupid they are because the president flubs, almost elected George Bush flubs his sentences. He gets sentences mixed up. Big deal. What has that got to do with anything? They said this about Ronald Reagan. He's so stupid. They said this about Dwight Eisenhower. He has these things mixed up. It's time we stop focusing on how stupid these guys are and start focusing on how vicious they are and how relentless and what they're doing. So, imperialism is really the real harsher word for what is now called globalization. And what it really is the expansionist form of capitalism, of giant corporate capitalism. You got to make that clear. We're talking about the giant corporations. Because when I launch into criticisms about capitalism, I immediately get people, there are always people sloshing in bathos and start talking about, What about the mom and pop business, and they struggle and they build it up and they create some jobs from some other people? Ooh. And I go, ooh, nice. I said, we're not talking about that. We're talking about these giant multi-billion-dollar corporations that are not adding a little something to the community, but carving up whole continents and destroying our ecology. That's what we're talking about. Can we talk about that? Giant corporate capitalism. So that's what I mean whenever I say capitalism, not mom and pop and small businesses, nice little bookstores, which I want to support too. Now, we are taught a few things about capitalism. We're taught that it's a system that works, and we're taught that it's brought us prosperity, that capitalism creates prosperity. I am going to argue against that hypothesis tonight. 1. 2, I'm going to convince you that that hypothesis is wrong. 3, I'm going to do that in the next 5 or 10 seconds. Almost the entire world is capitalist, and almost the entire world is poor. There you are. I'm coming to this other thing that I'm using that the media usually doesn't use. It's called evidence. Look at the world. Most of the world is capitalist. There's capitalist Indonesia. It's miserably poor and getting poorer. There's capitalist India. There's capitalist Thailand, capitalist Nigeria, El Salvador, Haiti, Mexico, Brazil, capitalist Argentina, which is falling apart and unraveling, capitalist Russia, Poland, Bulgaria, privatization, third worldization. Poor, poor. The number of people living in poverty today is growing at a faster rate than the world's population. That is capitalism's expansion. That's capitalism's prosperity that it's bringing. Capitalism does not work quite well for the people in those countries. Now, that is also capitalism at its most successful, because capitalism in Indonesia works quite well for the capitalists. It's just the people aren't doing too well. Well, okay, gee, I hadn't thought of it. And we never think of those countries as being capitalist, too. Yeah, all right, doesn't work so well for the common people of those third world countries, but it's given us a good standard of living. Well, that, too, I'm going to refute. It's going to take maybe a little longer than 5 seconds, maybe 20, 25 seconds. Are you getting your money's worth or not, all right? In this country, let's put aside the mass inequalities. Let's put aside the tens of millions of people who struggle from hand to mouth. Let's put aside the many who live without real economic security, which might include many of us. Let's put aside the desperate ones at the very bottom. Let's even put aside the middle-class people who are getting ripped off left and right with their taxes and overwork and loss of benefits and the like. Let's put aside the impoverishment of the public sector and the destruction of a livable environment. Let's accept the idea that we live in great material abundance, which in fact, compared to much of the world, we do. Many in this country do live well. But it wasn't capitalism that gave us this standard of living. It was the democratic struggle against capitalism. They didn't give us all these things. I mean, why don't we Americans work for 15 cents an hour as they do in Haiti and Indonesia? Is it because we're just so much more self-respecting? Is that it? No. It's because the democratic class struggle has advanced to a more favorable level. And that's happened only in the last few generations. In 1900, America was a third world country, half a century before the term was invented. We were a third world nation Child labor was widespread. Poverty was widespread. 14-hour workdays. 10-year-olds working in factories for 14 hours, 7 days a week. No social services to speak of. A few church soup kitchens and charities, maybe. No social benefits. Typhoid epidemics in our major cities. Tuberculosis and other diseases of poverty. No public housing or public health programs. Very little public education. No public libraries, really. Advances came not with capitalism. That condition, that's what capitalism gave us. That's what the country was. A pure, free market, unregulated, undiluted capitalism in 1900. But massive margins of profit. Huge margins of profit. Massive, massive, massive wealth for the Mellons and the Morgans and the Huntingtons and the Hartfords and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts. More money than they knew what to do with. And you know what they wanted after they got that money? They wanted more, and they wanted more. And they would destroy whole communities to get more and more and more. Wealth, my friends, wealth is the most damaging and the most dangerous addiction that this society faces. It was the people, it was the American people, it was the working people in this country who fought and fought for the 8-hour day, who fought for public education, who fought for public health services. It was the people who fought for decent housing and a decent standard of living, who fought for a minimum wage, who fought against discrimination. Name one great leader, name one great political leader, name one great intellectual who fought and did those things. No, those people, they jumped on the bandwagon after the people fought. And it was the plutocrats, it was the capitalists, it was the economic royalists who fought against every one of those things. They fought against giving you a decent wage. They're still fighting against that. They're still fighting for wage cuts. They fought against Social Security. They fought against occupational safety. They're still fighting against it. They fought against environmental protections. They still are fighting against it and undermining it in every way they can because they're afraid they're going to lose out on a dollar. Because every dollar they got to give to you, every dollar they've got to spend on stupid things like public safety and wages and occupational safety and consumer product safety, every dollar wasted on stupid things like that, which the free market would take care of. Every dollar spent on that is one less dollar for their insatiable greed. And that's it. So don't credit the capitalists for giving you whatever modicum of prosperity you have. We got it despite it. We tore it out of their teeth and out of their greedy claws. And we still got to hold on to it, and they're trying to get it back from us. It wasn't capitalism that brought these advances. It was democracy. It was the people in action. It was class struggle. Class struggle, my friends, is one of the major and central expressions of democracy. That's what class struggle is about. When they get up, they do class warfare on us all the time. Taxes, tax cuts for the rich, this, that. They're always doing class war on us. The minute we rally and we start attacking this corporate rich, they say, "Oh, you're preaching class warfare." George the First used to say that. The minute we start to fight back or answer back, "Oh, you're preaching class warfare." I have another name for that. It is class struggle. It is class warfare. The other name for it, when people become the active social agents of their own lives and go out and protest and try to better their lives, another name for that is called democracy. And they wouldn't recognize it if you slap them right in the face with it. They wouldn't know what it is. And it was these economic royalists, the rich bankers, the merchant class, the slaveholders, they fought against political democracy as well as economic democracy. They fought against the elimination of property qualifications for voters and office holders. After all, they put that into the laws. They put that into the laws, those property qualifications. Those were their laws. They fought against extending the vote, universal suffrage for working men in the 1820s and 30s. They fought against suffrage for women. They fought against the abolition of slavery and Jim Crow. They fought against honest elections and democratic ballot access and proportional representation and campaign finance reform and securing civil liberties. And they're still fighting against it. Do you have the evidence? Have I proven my case? Just go out and look at it all. That's what they're doing. Political and economic democracy are the things that they fear the most. Democracy is always under siege and always endangered by plutocracy. So when we say that capitalism works or it doesn't work, we must specify for whom. Because capitalism doesn't work all that well. Giant corporate finance capital doesn't work all that well for third world nations. It doesn't work all that well for other people. But it works quite well for the capitalists. The rate of capital accumulation per dollar invested is much higher in third world countries. The public sector is smaller or non-existent. Regulation is less, non-existent in many cases. The goal is to get us all back to the third world. The dream is to get all of North America and Denmark and Sweden and Western Europe and such, get it all back, get them all working as hard as the people do in Indonesia. Oh, who's going to buy all this stuff? Oh, you'll buy. You may have to buy less. You just have to work twice as hard to buy. Do you work twice as hard to buy that pair of shoes? I make that much more on those shoes. So they're working very hard to get us back to 1900. To achieve all this, the U.S. globalists have been the greatest purveyors of state-sponsored terrorism the world has ever seen. U.S. national security state has supported and financed Muslim terrorists in Afghanistan, in Bosnia and Kosovo, against a democratically and elected multi-party Yugoslavian government in Bosnia and Kosovo, in various other countries. U.S. operatives have worked with death squads, torturers, drug traffickers in countries too numerous to list here. You know, not long after September 11 and when Bush decided to target Afghanistan, someone remarked, almost in passing, like a throwaway line, said, well, the CIA has close links with the anti-Taliban groups and also with the Taliban groups. CIA has close links with both those groups and has had some links with Al-Qaeda. I mean, just interesting toss-away line. Nobody said, well, how come? What's that all about? All of this is a matter of public record. All of it is largely ignored by the corporate media. Very little of it is known by the general public. Since World War II, the U.S. national security state has been a key force in overthrowing popular governments in Guatemala, Guyana, Brazil, Chile, Iran under Mossadegh, Uruguay, Syria, Indonesia under Sukarno, Greece, twice, Argentina, twice, Haiti, Bolivia, and other countries too numerous to mention. And replacing them with pro-capitalist military regimes that opened up their markets, their resources, their cheap labor to Western corporate investors on terms that were completely favorable to the investors. In those years, the U.S. has launched state-sponsored terrorist attacks and proxy mercenary wars in Angola, 2 million dead. Mozambique, 900,000 killed, the Renamo murderers, CIA trained and financed. How many of us read large, copious, penetrating articles about these things? Did the media provide that for us? I don't think so. Ethiopia, Portugal, South Yemen, Nicaragua, Cambodia, East Timor, Western Sahara, Egypt, Lebanon, Peru, Iran, Zaire, Jamaica, the Fiji Islands, and other countries. These lists are not exhaustive. I'm just giving you the names I jotted down from my own memory. In the last 3 decades, U.S. forces have launched aerial attacks or direct military actions with U.S. forces. Now we're talking about U.S. missiles, U.S. forces, not just U.S. weapons in the hands of mercenary or comprador groups, but U.S. forces directly. In violation of UN Charter and international law, including invasions against Vietnam, Dominican Republic, North Korea, invasions or attacks, I'm saying, Laos, Cambodia, Haiti, Lebanon, Grenada, Panama, Iraq, Somalia, Afghanistan, and Yugoslavia. There's no rogue state. There's no communist state that has a record like that in these last 3 decades. The number of countries invaded, bombed, large numbers of people killed and destroyed. When this George Bush talks about bombing Iraq, taking action, the euphemistic terms, we may have to take action. We have to take action. We're looking at this operation against Iraq. You see the sanitizing, normalizing terms that are being used. This move, we have to make our move against Saddam Hussein. It's not against Saddam Hussein, it's against the Iraqi people. They won't send troops in there until they bombed and blasted and destroyed and leveled Baghdad. Do you know who lives in Baghdad? Children live in Baghdad. I was just there 2 years ago. Children. Lovely, nice, little, friendly children. Mothers, grandmothers, young men, young women, old women. People who have every right to be alive, just as much as us, who've never done anything. Many of them don't even know or care where the United States is and have never created any injury against this country, nor has their country as a political entity ever committed any injury. So there's no communist country or so-called rogue state or axis of evil. There's no evil axis country that has this record of violent aggression, mass destruction, and violation of international law. Today, the U.S. neo-colonial empire, it's a neo-imperialism. You understand the difference between imperialism and neo-imperialism. Our empire, the British Empire, when I was a kid, you used to take a globe and you could see all this pink all over the globe. That was the British Empire. And you say, my gosh, where you went and you planted the Union Jack and all that. 50 years before the Brits thought of doing this in India, the U.S. had devised a new form of imperialism. And they did it in Cuba. In about 1902, they went to Cuba, 1904, and they said, look, we just stole you fair and square from the Spaniards, who were willing to negotiate a settlement and leave, but we didn't want them to leave. We wanted to have a war so we could have an excuse to take not only Cuba, but Puerto Rico and Guam and the Philippines. So we got you now, but it doesn't look so good. We're a republic having colonies. In fact, I never had colonies. Another thing, when I was a kid in school, they were called territories. The U.S. had territories, different places, not too many of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you Cubans your independence. We're going to give you your own constitution. In fact, here it is. And check the spelling because our Spanish isn't that good. And you're going to have your own presidente, and you're going to have your own currency, money, and you can put anybody you want on the dollar bills. You can put Jose Marti if you want. It doesn't have to be George Washington. Hey, we're flex. You're going to have your own flag. It's going to be red, white, and blue. But you have only one star on it because you're just a little island. You know. And for all of this, all we get in return, all we get in our usual selfless way, is we will just own your sugar industry, your tobacco industry, your nickel mining, your oil refineries, and we'll control all your exports and imports, and we have control of all your relations with third nations. So you're independent now. There you go. They did that, they did that half a century before the British thought of doing it elsewhere. So we have all these independent countries whose militaries we support, whose markets we control, who we can bring to their knees with the threat of sanctions and the like. 300 major military bases all over the world. We need them, Dick Cheney says. We need them because there are other enemies. With the overthrow of communism, there was a sudden panic, an enemy shortage they had in Washington. What do we do? Because the only way the empire can exist, the empire exists by feeding off the republic. It uses the resources of the republic so that patricians can pursue their far-off plunder. They need your taxes, they need your resources, they need your sons and daughters so that they can go and do these things. And to do that, the only way they can do that is by convincing you this is for your interest, your security, your safety, because there's a world out there of terrible threats and such. Now, so we need all these bases and all that because there's a world out there that threatens us. Why don't they threaten Denmark or Luxembourg or Sweden or one of these, or Spain? I don't know. Well, in fact, it does happen. They do threaten. Because as the U.S. successfully, the U.S. national security state, and I don't say U.S., I don't say we. As we go into these countries and we do this, it's not we, okay? Stop the weing. It's not we. It's they who are doing it. When you say we, you create a community of interest between us and them. Let's first step toward our liberation and our struggle, let's at least get back the right vocabulary and not let them using it. When we say we go in there and we kill people in this country and we kill, you're creating a community of interest with the killers. And we aren't doing that. Plus you deprive yourselves of our own we. I heard one noted activist and leader, I won't mention her name, in the same sentence she said, it's terrible what we are doing in Central America and we have to fight against what we're doing there. We run out of we's after a while. It's what they are doing. And the U.S., I forgot what I was saying. What was I talking about before that? That's the trouble when you digress from your digressions. I can't get back to where I was. What? Wait a minute, wait. Yes. Sounds like. Neo-imperialism. No, we've already done neo-imperialism. All right, you're getting out of hand now. Stop it. Right. All right, that is the point, right, that the U.S. has been destroying democratic movements. U.S. leaders have been destroying democratic movements throughout the Middle East, in Syria, in Egypt, in Yemen, in Iran, and Iraq. Democratic popular movements in Turkey, country after country, one country after another, those democratic movements have been repressed. The only channel they've got left is this Islamic, ultra-nationalist, right-wing expression. And that's the route they take. And so then, we American citizens, we become the targets of their terrorism, as happened a year ago, September 11. Now that September 11, which many of us looked at and saw it as a horrible event, the people who are running this country now looked at that as a golden opportunity. That's not my speculation. On September 14, I heard President-elect George Bush say, this may prove to be an opportunity, a really important opportunity. Remember those wonderful things he was saying? This is it's going to be the first war of the 21st century. The first war, yay! Instead of saying this should be a century of no war, or this should be the last war, or let's try to avoid war in this new century, saying this is going to be the first war, and something to look forward to all those other wars. And this has defined my administration now. He saw the peg, he saw this opening. And that became, and so we got this kind of incredible hype and whatever else that developed from that, which continued right to this September 11. Remember this just recent September 11? I had to watch it on TV because I'm a media critic, you see. And I had two radio shows I had to do that day. And one of them explicitly said, we'd like you to comment on the media's coverage of, the 1-year anniversary. I said, oh, Jesus. I knew what I was going to have to do. I had to get up, and I sat there and put the TV on like a kid not wanting to do his homework, watching his pain, looking at the stuff. And who do I see but Barbara Walters, Barbara Wawa? And she's got 7 9/11 widows. These women who lost their husbands on 9/11. And she's asking them questions like, do you miss your husbands? Or, when you think of your husband, do you feel pleasure or pain? I'm going, oh, Jesus. And then she sees a little 4-year-old kid, and she says, do you remember your daddy? What did you like the most about your daddy? And that was when I really almost lost it, I mean, lunch, I almost lost. And so I shut the TV rather than put my foot through it, which wouldn't be such a bad idea, but I'm a media critic. I need my TV. So. Now, the goal of all this imperialism is a very consistent and very rational goal. The countries, the movements, the leaders that are acted against are those who try to develop things in a different way. The countries, the movements, and the leaders who get U.S. support are those who foster the interests of the Fortune 500. The basic struggle is between those who think that the land, the labor, the resources, the natural resources, and the markets of the world should be there for the benefit of capital accumulation, for the benefit of a few, as against those who think that the land, the labor, and the natural resources and the capital of the world should be there for the development of human communities and human needs. That is the basic struggle that's going on here. And that global empire is there to make sure that those resources go to that first option, to prevent competing forms of economic governance. And that's every country, every leader who's been hit has been guilty of that. Right today you see it in Colombia. Right today you see it. Who's being targeted? Who's being maligned most vigorously of all the Latin American leaders? Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. Why? Because he's doing a little something. He's taking a little something from the rich and he's giving it to the poor. He's opening up clinics. He's opening up schools that kids can go to. He's eliminated the school fee so that children of families who never dreamed they could send their kids to school are now sending their kids to school. He's trying to clean up communities. He's putting through job programs and the like. So Hugo Chavez is now maligned. He's called a demagogue. He's called power crazy, erratic. He's got all sorts of personality problems, apparently. So the goal is to prevent competing centers of development. The goal is to prevent systems from developing that offer an alternative approach to the use of the world's resources and labor. The goal now, with the overthrow of communism, the goal now is to prevent also competing centers of capitalist development. the goal now is to really stick it to the working classes of all these countries that have won all these democratic gains, many of which the plutocrats have had to give them out of fear of communism, to sell it to them, to say, see, you've got so much better life than the people over there in those countries do. You're so much better off and all. Now we don't have to say that anymore. Say, look what's happening in Russia. People have been reduced to beggary. Human services have been pretty much abolished. All the public-owned industries are being privatized and all that. Why should we have to tolerate any of that stuff here? Now we're going to stick it to the working class. You people are going to work harder and harder. We're going to get you back to 1900. That is their goal. And the goal against third world nations was much the same. Often aid was given to third world nations, an attempt to develop a middle class in these nations, stability, to make sure some level of prosperity, some little visibility points of prosperity, so that these countries, what? Would not go communist. Now they got nowhere else to go. Those programs are being dropped. Aid is being cut back, or aid is being used for the plutocrats in those countries to help pay their particular infrastructures and the like. So the goal now is really to stop competing forms of capitalism. The goal is to create, as Haas and Pearl and Elliot Abrams and Condoleezza Rice and others have said, is to prevent another superpower from emerging. But I would say it's also to prevent any regional powers from emerging. It's also to prevent any viable, prosperous, self-developing countries from emerging, countries that might challenge our markets, countries that might really develop their own way and go their own way. There was one troublesome country back in the 1990s, even after the overthrow of communism, and that was Yugoslavia, right there in the middle of Europe, a rather large country with 80% of its economy publicly owned still, with a level of prosperity, uneven and all that, inequalities, highly imperfect society, but a level of prosperity that was still very high. A country that had no interest in joining NATO, had no interest in joining the European Union. It had to be broken up, and it was targeted, and it was torn apart, and ethnic enmities were incited, and Yugoslavia was broken up into a bunch of small, little, weak principalities, republics, money-driven, West-dominated republics. And privatization started. Everything's been privatized now in Macedonia. Everything's been privatized in Bosnia. Everything's soon to be privatized in the rest of Yugoslavia, which is just Serbia and Montenegro now. So there it is. Prevent self-defining countries like Iraq. Lots of oil, high quality. Iraq is the one country in the Middle East that is rich both in oil and water. Some of them have water, no oil. Some have oil, no water. Iraq had a good agricultural base, an excellent one, which has been ruined by depleted uranium all through the Basra region and everywhere else. Iraq had a standard of living that was the highest in the Middle East, even though it was being run by a right-wing slimeball named Saddam Hussein, who was put in by the CIA. The goal is to keep the region powerless. Iraq was proving to be a self-defining country, and that is not to be tolerated anymore. Now, to justify these aggressions, U.S. leaders conjure up fairy tales. They demonize the targeted people. Once you demonize the leaders. Once you demonize the leaders, you can target the people and bomb the people, apparently, as with the Serbs and Milosevic, as with the Iraqis and Saddam Hussein. Let's go back to 1990-91, because it sounds very familiar what's happening today. George I, Pappy Bush, Junior's father, was president. We were told that we had to bomb and kill lots of people in Iraq because Iraqi was threatening to invade Saudi Arabia. There was no evidence of that. Iraqi troops never massed on the Saudi border. It was said that Iraq was committing atrocities. We heard stories about the 500 babies that the Iraqi soldiers came into Kuwait and tore these 500 premature babies from incubators. Actually, there is water here. Thanks. You just reminded me. I need that. Many of us wondered about that. 500 babies in incubators at one time in a country of what, a couple of million people. All of LA County has only 40 incubators. What was Kuwait specializing in premature babies? It doesn't matter. Some years later, we discovered that story was a total fabrication, wasn't it? Invented by the ambassador's daughter or something, and it came out in congressional hearings. This is all, everything I'm telling you is public record. We were told that Iraq refused to negotiate when it was in Kuwait. That was false. Iraq was eager to negotiate. In fact, the French had started negotiations with the Iraqis, and Bush the first said they called that their nightmare scenario. Isn't that an interesting thing? That Iraq may actually negotiate a peaceful withdrawal from Kuwait. That was their nightmare scenario, because then they would lose their casus belli, their reason for perpetrating a war against Iraq. We were told that Iraq had invaded Kuwait. That was true. We weren't told about how Kuwait had been slant drilling in the Ramallah oil fields, had been blocking Iraq airline flights, etc. In any case, why attack Iraq for invading Kuwait? When we never attacked Turkey for invading Cyprus, we never attacked Israel and Syria for invading Lebanon, we never attacked Morocco for invading Western Sahara. Not only didn't we attack them, but we sent them aid. We sent aid to Israel. We sent aid to Turkey. We sent aid to Morocco. Another reason given for why we had to go and kill 100,000 people in Iraq was that the war would create jobs. That reason was given by the Secretary of State at that time, James Baker. He said, this war will create jobs. Excuse me? I mean, child pornography creates jobs. Auto accidents create jobs. I'm not kidding. Auto accidents are very good for the economy. Wreckers, tow trucks, mechanics, insurance companies, state troopers, lawyers, medical rehabilitation centers. Jobs, auto accidents create. I'm not being ironic or sarcastic. Auto accidents are good for the economy. What I'm saying is what's good for the capitalist economy is not always good for the people. That's the central theme of my talk. Then in late November 1990, I wrote about this in Against Empire. I have a little section on it. In late November, the Bush administration stumbled upon another reason for why they just had to invade Iraq or attack Iraq. And there was a poll that came out, and the poll said, if Saddam Hussein is developing nuclear weapons, nuclear missiles, I think it was, nuclear bomb, whatever, would you support military action against him? And that, a very lukewarm public up to then, that brought in a yes of about 70% or something. That became the major theme. And isn't it interesting that 11 years later, that is still the major theme, that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, nuclear capability, and the like. We're told today that Iraq has chemical and bacteriological weaponry. That's another charge that was true. It's true. But whose fault was that? Those factories have been destroyed, dismantled. And how did they get them in the first place? And from whom? I'll tell you where they got them from. They got them from the people who pretend to defend our interests, the people who run this country. That's where they got that chemical and bacteriological warfare. As a Republican Congressman, Ron Paul, just said the other day. Again, it's all a matter of public record. I'm gonna quote some of his statements when I get to them in another minute. That's still not. There's another fact that got lost down the memory hole, that the chemical and bacteriological warfare weaponry was given to Iraq by the U.S. with approval to use it in Iran, looking the other way when they used it against the Kurds. And now, hypocritically, to charge them, to charge them with crimes which we were complicit. Did I say we? Ooh, bow, boo, bam, bam. I don't want you doing that. which the U.S. was using. We're told that there's no democracy in Iraq. Well, whose fault is that? Again, who put Saddam Hussein into power? Who put him into power? It was the CIA who put him into power, and his mandate, his job was to destroy the Iraqi Democratic Revolution. And that's what he did. He destroyed the Kurdish Democratic Party. He destroyed the Iraqi Communist Party, which was a reformist party. He destroyed the whole left wing of his own Ba'ath Party. He destroyed them. And he destroyed that revolution. He set up a military dictatorship which was supported, advised, trained, and equipped and paid for by the U.S. But then he got out of line on oil prices. He got out of line on the question of economic self-development. He proved himself to be an economic nationalist instead of a proper comprador leader who says, come on in, Fortune 500, anything you want, on your terms completely. I'm not going to argue any terms for you. Anything you want. It's your oil. It just happens to be in our ground, in our land, but it's your oil. You just give me my cut. That'll be good. He didn't do that, so he had to be dealt with, you see. So why, if all these reasons are false, then why are these guys hyping up, revving up for a war against Iraq? Now, there you have a choice of two things. You can just say, they're so stupid because I'm so smart. I'm so much smarter than they. I see confusions. No. Just because you don't know what they're doing doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. You know? They're so stupid, these people who own and control the world and its resources. They just bumble along. Otherwise, you have a conspiracy theory, right? You think they actually think about these things and have intentions. Oh, weird. Well, I think there are, what I just said, very important, vital, strategic reasons for targeting Iraq. The reason which is to maintain this global empire that makes the world safe for the Fortune 500. For the multinational corporations, to prevent any alternative or independent political economic entities from emerging, to be not only the only superpower, but to be the supreme monopower, the totalistic global power. So there's this total strategic imperial goal. The second goal is there are very compelling political reasons. Just as there was in 1990-91. Bush was facing the savings and loan scandal that was about to blow open, wide open, and would have taken down his administration and put at least 2, possibly 3 of his sons into jail if the thing had really been unpeeled, as it was starting to be unpeeled on evening primetime television. Blew it right off the screen. Just like they've blown off the Harkins and Halliburton scandals. Political reasons. A war against Iraq distracts people from domestic problems and major scandals and from a recession. It justifies increased military spending. It fuels the patriotic hype. People, in turn, rally around the flag, and that flag is wrapped around the president. It increases his poll ratings. His approval rating already has gone up from 60 to 67% just these last 2 weeks, the more militant he's become. It diminishes the momentum behind dissent. Wrong there. It's going to activate and increase dissent. In this case, as it was with George I, the political reasons also bleed into the personal reasons. Is that right here? You've got the president and the vice president of the United States who were only a few weeks ago under investigation. It was the front page story. You had the whole Republican Party facing a disaster. It was the party of big corporate business. Now it can be once again the party of military strength, the party of military leadership, the party of saving America's defenses, etc. You had the president and the vice president under investigation for fraudulent accounting, false claims of profits at Harkin and at Halliburton, respectively, Bush and Cheney. False claims of profits to pump up stock values, and then heavy insider unloading of that stock just before it crashes and is revealed to be worthless. Both of those guys, both of them in that. You got both of them refusing to explain their actions during those periods or having given false explanations. So that's the third reason. There's a personal reason. These guys are watching for their own skins. And then there's a fourth reason for targeting Iraq, and that's oil. Iraq has top quality oil, the best in the world. It has the largest reserve in the Middle East, except for Saudi Arabia. 45 billion barrels at $25 a barrel is $1 trillion of oil. And both the president and vice president do not only represent oil, as every president has, they are big oil. They are themselves oil men. They're in it up to their necks. The Iraqi oil reserve is mostly publicly owned. Not a drop of it belongs to the U.S. oil cartels, although French and Russians are coming in on it. Saddam Hussein has made some agreements with private companies for exploitation, but not with the U.S. The London Financial Times, 24 February 98. Oil prices fell sharply because of the weekend agreement between the United Nations and the Iraqi government. Oil prices dropped sharply because peace was threatening to break out. Isn't that interesting? There was concern that, quote, much larger volumes of Iraqi crude oil would compete for market shares. Duh, they want to own it. They don't want to bring it on the market just now. The news prompted further gloom for the stocks of oil companies, which have fallen sharply over the past couple of months. San Francisco Chronicle, just 2 days before that, February 98, Iraq's oil poses threat to the West, was the headline of the article. To the West? We're the West. Do you feel threatened by Iraq's oil? Do you feel threatened by Iraq's oil? No. They mean it poses a threat to Western oil investors, not the West. It's not geography that's just happening. There are people doing things, pursuing particular interests. If Iraq is able to re-enter the international oil market, this is the Chronicle story, it would devalue British North Sea oil, undermine American oil production. Do we know any? Can you name two people who have a key benefiting interest in oil production? And much more important, it would destroy the huge profits which the United States stands to gain from its massive investment in Caucasian oil production, especially in Azerbaijan. The suspicion that oil prices and profits are playing a role in the Clinton administration's threat is only increased by the UN's refusal to allow any income for the sale of Iraqi crude to be used to repair and maintain the company's oil wells and pumping stations. So they want to keep that country prostrate, you see. The Iraqs have been falsely accused by the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, and by the President of the United States, George Bush, falsely accused of noncompliance. There were UN inspections in 1998. There have been monthly inspections by UN observers every month, right up to more recently, and Iraq has been in compliance. 427 sites. This is the Iraqi foreign minister saying, we have 427 sites they wanted to inspect. They inspected all of them. They charged non-cooperation in 5 cases. In those 5 cases, one of them was they wanted to inspect a small headquarters of a political party, the Arabic Socialist Party. We asked them, what's the relationship between small headquarters of a political party and a disarmament mission? They didn't answer. These were the kinds of violations. Another was a guest house where they ran into the same things. It had been the Director General of Security. It had been his headquarters. It had been converted into a guest house. They raised issues. Why would you want to investigate a guest house? There was a delay of about 40 minutes when they posed these questions. This was called non-compliance. It was a delay. You see, they're going in with this like these drug SWAT teams. Oh, you're hesitating there. That means there's some guy in there who's throwing all the secret stuff down the toilet or something. They did get to investigate the guest house, and nothing was found there, and that was still issued as a non-compliance. These were the level of non-compliances. Another one was they refused to open up things that were closed on Fridays. They said Friday evenings, most things are closed. You could always, if anything's open on Friday, you can look at it, but you have to wait till the next day. That was the level of non-compliance, and we're not being told that. And overlooked in all of this is that the U.S. national security state itself has weapons of mass destruction. And who gives this country, who gives the leaders of this country the right to decide who can have what weaponry, who can kill who, on just some speculation? And they've used those weapons again and again. They've used that mighty military force against Panama, Grenada, Nicaragua, Yugoslavia, Iraq, Afghanistan. You can go on. Destroying their infrastructures, wrecking whole generations of people, destroying jobs, their economy, destroying their environment. Crimes against international law, crimes against humanity, crimes against the U.S. Constitution, crimes against the UN Charter. Well, if Bush can pull it off against Iraq, he'll try it against Iran and against Cuba and eventually against Venezuela if he can't get rid of Chavez through the usual destabilizing strangulation techniques. And this is the foreign policy of the plutocratic batterer. It's a batterer's foreign policy. You batter and you beat and you apply just so much punishment and pressure until you get compliance just as you want. And then when they start to comply, then you stop the battering. Once Yugoslavia put in a pro-West government and opened up everything and began privatizing everything, the battering stopped. And so it would with Iraq. There is opposition, though, strong opposition throughout the Middle East, Europe, especially in Greece, and now in Germany. You have Gerhard Schroeder, slimy, opportunistic, right-wing social democrat, just like Tony Blair and Bill Clinton, but suddenly coming out as a man of peace in the election and won re-election, squeaked through because he was 17 points behind a few months ago, and he won the election because he came out against engaging in the war against Iraq. Let's see what he really does now that he's been re-elected. Let's just see what he does, though. You have the Saudis themselves saying that they're worried about the public reaction in their country and they don't want to go in full force against Iraq. And they're also beginning to get a little uncomfortable about their great benefactor and allies, the Americans. If you can do this so arbitrarily, so omnipotently there, what might you do with us if we have a falling out sometime? So there are people all around who are questioning this sort of thing. Well, here's some questions that were raised by. You want to hear this thing by Ron Paul? Should I tell you about this? Here's some of the questions he raised. He's a Texas Republican, member of Congress from Texas. And he got up in the House of Representatives September 10. And these are the questions he raised. Is it not true that the reason we did not bomb the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War was because we knew they could retaliate? Is it not also true that we are willing to bomb Iraq now because we know it cannot retaliate, which just confirms that there is no real threat? Is it? You didn't know that you were going to be applauding a Texas Republican before tonight. That away. And it can be found in all sorts of odd places. Is it not true that the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency was able to complete its yearly verification mission? I'm sorry, I called it monthly and that was wrong. Its yearly verification mission to Iraq just this year with Iraqi cooperation. Is it not true that the intelligence community, that phrase, the intelligence community, they're just a community, CIA and all that. Isn't it not true that the murderous pig operations conducted by the CIA, all right, okay, intelligence community has been unable to develop a case tying Iraq to global terrorism at all, much less the attacks on the United States last year? Does anyone remember that 15 of the 19 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia and that none came from Iraq? See, if they had all come from Iraq, that would be made an issue. So I think it's fair to make it an issue that they didn't come from Iraq, just polemically speaking. Was former CIA counterterrorism chief Vincent Canestraro wrong when he recently said there is no confirmed evidence of Iraq's links to terrorism? Why are we taking precious military and intelligence resources away from tracking down those who did attack the United States and who may again attack the United States and using them to invade countries that have not attacked the United States? How can Hussein be compared to Hitler when he has no navy or air force and now has an army 1/5 the size of 12 years ago, which even then proved totally inept at defending the country? They weren't inept, they were just pulverized by vastly more massive firepower that destroyed them. Is it not true that the constitutional power to declare war is exclusively that of the Congress? Should presidents, contrary to the Constitution, allow Congress to concur only when pressured by public opinion? Are we willing to bear the economic burden of a $100 billion war against Iraq with oil prices expected to skyrocket? Oh, yes, that's what they like. Nothing wrong. They got nothing. The Bush-Cheney boys have nothing against skyrocketing oil prices. Remember that. Remember they are what? Wealth addicts, right? And would this not further rattle an already shaky American economy? Iraq's alleged violations of UN resolutions are given as reasons to initiate an attack. Yet, is it not true that hundreds of U.S. resolutions have been ignored by various countries without penalty? Did former President Bush, that is George I, did he not cite the UN resolution of 1990 as the reason he could not march into Baghdad? That was the reason. He just didn't want it. They got worried that if they got rid of Saddam, there might be a democratic revolution coming, and they just weren't sure, and Bush was facing an election, and he wanted it all settled, neat and clean. That's why he did. Okay, but it's true. He cited the UN resolution. He was suddenly respectful of it as to why we could not march into Baghdad. But is it not true that supporters of a new attack today assert that that this UN resolution is the very reason we can march into Baghdad? Is it not true that contrary to current claims, the no-fly zones were set up by Britain and the United States without specific approval from the United Nations? That is not what is being claimed now. The impression you get now is that they're doing the United Nations job here of surveilling Iraq. And incidentally, the bombing of Iraq has never stopped. It isn't going to be going on. It has never stopped. Every week there's 1 or 2 sorties out there. I was in Iraq in 2 years ago. I was there only for a week, and a school was hit by U.S. planes, and 2 teachers were killed, and 4 students were badly injured. How can we declare, this is Congressman Paul continuing, how can our declared goal of bringing democracy, I like this one. How can our declared goal of bringing democracy to Iraq be believable when we prop up dictators throughout the Middle East and support military tyrants like Musharraf in Pakistan, who overthrew a democratically elected president? That is pretty good for a Republican. Here's even the better one. Are you familiar with the 1994 Senate hearings that revealed that the United States knowingly supplied chemical and bacteriological materials to Iraq during the Iran-Iraq War and as late as 1992, including after the alleged Iraqi gas attack on a Kurdish village? Then he goes on to say that attack apparently was not conducted by Iraq. I don't want to go into all of that. It's pretty old stuff. Just a couple of more things. Here's another question he asked. Why do the oil company executives strongly support this war if oil is not the real reason we plan to take over Iraq? What is the moral argument for attacking a nation that has not initiated aggression against us and could not if it wanted to? Anyway, that's what we got there. Now, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. Did you all notice how Ron Paul's dramatic dissension from his own party and criticism of his own president? You notice how that all got on the air over this last week? Weren't you just riveted listening to him? Have you all heard these interviews of him and you all saw this? Have you? No, you didn't. I was just kidding you. Yes, that's right. But we see this thing going on. As I said, there's opposition developing in Greece and Germany and Italy and the United States. There's a lot of opposition all over the world. It's not reported, but it's happening. Opposition just this week, Marin County. I spoke in Marin this past Saturday, and Zhenya Spake, who was one of the peace organizers there, he said, our candlelight vigil was usually about 10 or 12 people, and we had 150 people, candlelight. He said, and the cars came by. It was nonstop, the beeping of the horns, beeping. Everybody giving thumbs up. Nobody gave the finger. Nobody gave the middle finger. It was all thumbs up. And beeping their horns, people were really feeling. And we thought we'd have a demonstration, our first demonstration in March. We were hoping to get 500. We got over 2,000 people. 2,000 people. 2,000 people in Marin County. Marin. People abandoning their hot tubs and skipping their yoga and meditation classes and getting out there. Now, if 2,000 people can do it in Marin, I say Santa Cruz can do 5,000 or 10,000. And the goal is to build up these coalitions, build a base of opinion, do these 2 things. One, you organize horizontally, and also you impact and organize vertically. You take that base, it's not 1-2 step, those 2 are going on simultaneously, and you target our leaders. You target them, our leaders. You target those oil leaders. You target them and you pressure them and you let them know that the people here don't tolerate this kind of war of aggression. They don't think they're not interested in your opinions. Oh, my friends, they're so interested. Oh, my friends, they're so interested. They follow, they listen, they bring people. I don't know who he is. I don't want to point him out. Maybe that clean-cut guy there, I don't know. But they track, they listen, they tap our phones, they do all these things. They are so keenly worried. They know that they stand on our shoulders, and if we begin to move and rumble and really get it together, they begin to really sway and shake up there. Remember, brothers and sisters, when the people are ready to lead, the leaders will eventually follow. Thank you very much. you.